My name is Helen Norris. I'm 33 years old, and I used to believe I could tell the difference between love and a lie. Before anything else, before the hotel rooms, before the screenshots, before the lawyer emails, and the sickening feeling of watching your life split down the middle, I need to say this. I'm not sharing this as some dramatic plot twist story. If anything, it's a warning label, a what not to do guide written in shaking hands. Because when your gut starts screaming, it's not being paranoid. It's trying to save you. My husband, Ethan Norris, is 31. We'd been together 8 years, married for 6, the kind of marriage people called solid. We were the couple others pointed to like proof that commitment still existed. And I was proud of that. Maybe too proud. The first 2 days of his work trip abroad were normal, almost sweet in the way long distance can be when you miss someone. He'd FaceTime me at night, even after exhausting days. I watched him pull off his tie and talk with that tired little half smile he did when he was trying not to complain. He told me about the meetings, the deadlines, the local team joining them. He sounded stressed, but present, still mine. That's why the third day hit like a door slamming in an empty house. They moved locations, out of the hotel, and into a compound where they'd be working closely with local coworkers on a bigger project. He texted less that day. Not unusual, I told myself. Busy days happen. But something about the silence felt deliberate, like the quiet wasn't because he couldn't talk, but because he didn't want to. Around 11:00 p.m., his time, I finally got a message. I'm going to the sauna with Sienna. Sienna was a female coworker he'd mentioned in passing. Apparently, she was the one he was sharing a room with on the trip. The sauna, he said, was in the compound. Something common in that country, a way people decompressed after work. On paper, it sounded harmless. But the timing bothered me. They'd had a long, stressful day. It was late, and he didn't add anything. No, I'm exhausted. No, I'll call you after. No playful emoji. No warmth. Just information. Then nothing. Minutes passed. An hour. 2. I tried not to spiral. I told myself not to become that person, the person who measures love in response times. I've never been controlling. I've never wanted to be. But I have a history. Before Ethan, I was cheated on in a previous relationship. More than once. I learned the patterns the hard way. The sudden coldness, the unexplained gaps, the weird new defensiveness that shows up like a guard dog where tenderness used to be. Ethan always felt like the opposite of that, which meant one of two things. Either I was wrong and my trauma was talking, or he'd gotten very good at hiding. At 1:30 a.m., a message came in. Going to sleep. You want to get up early. Love you. That was it. No, sorry I disappeared. No, sauna was crowded. No, I'm wiped. No, can't talk. The words were technically affectionate, but the tone felt borrowed, like he'd pasted them from a template. I stared at my phone until my screen went dim, and that's when the dread arrived. Slow, creeping, confident. My gut feelings have always been right. I don't say that like a brag. I yell at it like a curse. Because being right about something like this doesn't make you powerful. It makes you sick. Ethan had left his laptop at home. It syncs messages, always has. We never hid passwords from each other. It was part of our healthy marriage routine. Transparency, trust, no secrets. I didn't rush to it immediately. I stood in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, trying to talk myself down. Helen, stop! You're exhausted. You're projecting. You're making a story out of silence. But my hands moved anyway. I opened the laptop. At first, I told myself I was just checking if something happened, if maybe his phone died, or he got pulled into an emergency meeting, or anything that made this feel normal again. The screen lit up with his message threads. Most were boring, work group chats, logistics, colleagues sharing files. And then I saw her. A message thread with a woman labeled Kara. I knew the name in passing. He'd mentioned her a few times over the last couple weeks, not often, just enough that it didn't seem suspicious. She wasn't even someone he worked directly with, as far as I knew, just part of the broader team. The last message Ethan had sent Kara was time-stamped at the exact moment he texted me, "Love you." It was a single emoji, a heart with a bandage. I'd never seen it before. I didn't even know what it meant. But something about it felt intimate, not romantic in an obvious way, worse, like a quiet inside joke, like comfort. I stared at it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Maybe she's going through something, I thought. Maybe a family issue. Maybe he's just being kind. I tried to hold on to that explanation like a railing. Then I left the laptop open on the bed while I changed into pajamas. I was still telling myself I was being ridiculous. And then, in real time, the thread updated. A new message appeared from Ethan to Kara. Come to room 3. For a second, my brain refused to translate the words, like language itself had failed. Like if I didn't understand it, it couldn't hurt me. Then the meaning slammed in. My heart started racing so hard I thought I might vomit. I remember standing there with one sock on, the other dangling from my fingertips, like my body had frozen mid-routine because it sensed danger. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't even cry loudly. I made this small, broken sound in my throat, half gasp, half sob, and clapped a hand over my mouth as if I could physically hold the truth inside. I started running through possibilities like a desperate attorney defending a guilty client. Room 3 could be a conference room, a team hangout, a storage room where the supplies were. But why message only her? Why not the group? Why at 1:30 in the morning? And why did my husband tell me he was going to sleep while inviting her somewhere called Room 3? I stared at the message status. Not delivered yet. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she wouldn't see it. Maybe he'd regret it. I sat down slowly, like my legs had stopped belonging to me. And then another thought crawled in, cold and sharp. If he was comfortable typing that, it wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I saw it. I wanted to call him right then, to demand an explanation, to force him to talk until the truth fell out. But something steadier in me whispered, not yet. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it, gaslight it, laugh it off, or worse, he'd get careful. And I couldn't survive careful. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I watched, because I needed to know if my marriage was cracking, or already shattered. I didn't go to bed. I told myself I would. Told myself that sleep might soften the edges of what I'd just seen. But the moment I closed my eyes, the words burned brighter against the inside of my skull. Come to room 3. I sat on the edge of the bed with the laptop balanced on my knees, the glow of the screen painting my hands a sickly blue. Every few seconds, I refreshed the thread, watching the tiny delivery icon like it was a heart monitor. Still undelivered. Maybe her phone was dead. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe, God, please, maybe this was all some misunderstanding that would make sense in the morning. I hated how desperately my mind reached for excuses. It felt like betrayal of myself. Minutes stretched into an hour. My body buzzed with adrenaline, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. I couldn't stop replaying the night he'd told me about the sauna, the way he hadn't elaborated, the way he'd ended the conversation so neatly, so finally. At 2:37 a.m., the screen changed. A reply appeared. From Kara. On my way. My vision tunneled. I felt it physically, like someone had punched a hole through my chest and the air was rushing out. I pressed my palm flat against my sternum, trying to steady my breathing. On my way. Not what, not who else is there, not now. Just on my way. Like this was expected. Like it had happened before. I waited for the read receipt. It never came. The message stayed unread. At first, I thought maybe Ethan had fallen asleep. Maybe he'd sent the message impulsively and passed out. Maybe Kara would knock, get no answer, and leave. I clung to that image. Her standing in a dim hallway, knocking once, twice, then shrugging and walking away. But the minutes kept passing. 30, 45, an hour. The message still unread. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the screen like if I looked away, something worse would happen without me seeing it. At some point, exhaustion made my thoughts slippery. I started bargaining again. Maybe she went to the wrong room. Maybe someone else opened the door. Maybe room 3 isn't what I think it is. I hated myself for how badly I wanted to believe those things. By the time the sun began to lighten the edges of the sky outside my window, I'd been awake for nearly 24 hours. Then, suddenly, the entire conversation vanished. 1 second, the thread was there. The next, it was gone. Deleted. Not just the last message. Everything. I felt something inside me collapse. Something fragile I hadn't even realized I was still holding together. That was the moment my denial finally died. Because innocent people don't erase conversations in real time. They don't delete evidence while someone else is watching. An hour later, another message appeared, this time to a different coworker. Ethan wrote that he had Kara's phone and needed to let her know something. It was casual, work-related, normal. Too normal. I leaned back against the headboard and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. My whole body was shaking now, the delayed reaction crashing into me all at once. I started thinking backward, not just about tonight, but about the weeks leading up to it. A couple of weeks earlier, Ethan and I had gone out for drinks with some of his coworkers. It was loud and crowded, the kind of place where people loosened up and pretended deadlines didn't exist. That was the first time I'd met Kara. I remembered it suddenly, vividly, like my brain had saved the memory in a locked drawer and only now decided I was ready. She was standing close to Ethan at the bar. Too close. At one point, he was holding something, his phone, I think, and she plucked it from his hand with a grin and slipped it into her pocket. Teasing, he'd called it. I'd smiled then, even though my stomach had tightened. I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I didn't want to embarrass him. Later outside, I was talking to someone else when I noticed them again. Kara was touching his arm. Not briefly, not accidentally. Her fingers lingered just a second too long, and then they hugged. It wasn't an innocent, polite hug. It was full-bodied, familiar. I remembered how angry I'd felt, not because of the hug itself, but because Ethan had been distant with me all week. Too tired for affection, too stressed for intimacy. But apparently not too tired for her. That night, I'd said something about it. Not accusing, just honest. I told him it hurt to see him giving warmth to someone else when I felt shut out. He'd blown up, accused me of overreacting, of not trusting him, of adding pressure when he was already overwhelmed. He'd packed a bag and threatened to leave, stormed out of the apartment, only to come back an hour later, claiming he'd cooled off. I'd felt guilty. I always did. I remembered another night, months ago, when he'd gone quiet after drinks, and I'd found deleted messages on his tablet. He'd denied anything inappropriate, turned it around on me, told me my past trauma was projecting onto him. I'd believed him. Now, sitting alone in the early morning light, that belief felt like ash in my mouth. Later that day, he FaceTimed me. I answered like nothing was wrong. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, calm, measured, almost cheerful. Inside, I was screaming. He was wearing a loose shirt, the camera angled low, and that's when I saw it. Red marks, starting at his neck and trailing down toward his collarbone. Too concentrated, too uneven, like skin that had been rubbed raw. The same way my skin looks when we make out and his beard scratches against me. I asked him about it, forcing my tone to stay casual. He looked surprised, too surprised. Oh, didn't notice, must be my scarf. But the marks were only on one side, and they went lower than any scarf would. I didn't push, I couldn't, not yet. We talked for almost an hour, or rather, I talked. He seemed distracted, fidgety, like he was stalling something. He didn't follow his usual routine, didn't change into pajamas, didn't brush his teeth, just sat there, lingering. I realized with a jolt that he was waiting to see if Kara would message him. I stalled too, asking pointless questions, circling the same topics, keeping him on the call because I needed to see what happened next. At some point, I asked about the sauna again. His story shifted slightly. Details didn't line up. I recorded the call, not because I wanted to use it against him, but because I was so tired, so disoriented, I needed proof later that I wasn't imagining things. By the time we hung up, I'd been awake for over 36 hours. Sleep came hard, but when it did, it was deep and merciful. When I woke up, there were no new messages between Ethan and Kara. Nothing. The silence was louder than anything I'd seen so far. A few hours later, he FaceTimed again. He told me he'd be busy, that if he didn't text, it wasn't because he was doing something else I might be thinking. The words landed like a confession disguised as reassurance. As we talked, my mind kept circling the same question. How much evidence do you need before love stops being a reason to stay? I still loved him. God help me, I did. But I was starting to realize something terrifying. Even if nothing else happened after that night, even if he never touched her again, I couldn't live the rest of my life watching timestamps, decoding emojis, and wondering what Room 3 really meant. And that realization hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. For a while, nothing happened. That was the cruelest part. No new messages, no accidental slips, no dramatic reveal. Just silence. Thick, deliberate, and suffocating. The kind of quiet that doesn't calm you down, but sharpens you. Turns every thought into a blade. I told myself I'd stop checking, that I'd give myself a break, that if I stared at his messages long enough, I'd eventually go numb. None of that happened. Instead, my mind started doing something dangerous. It started normalizing the pain. I went through the motions of my days, answered emails, made coffee, smiled at the barista, like my marriage wasn't slowly decomposing behind my eyes. I caught myself rehearsing explanations for Ethan, explanations he hadn't even asked for yet. Maybe it was emotional, not physical. Maybe it was a moment of weakness. Maybe stress really did push him somewhere he didn't mean to go. I hated those thoughts. They felt like betrayal of myself. Then, late one night, the screen lit up again. It started innocently, almost boring. Ethan messaged Kara. Work stuff, files, deadlines, the kind of conversation that could pass any audit. I remember thinking, see, this is what normal looks like. You're spiraling. But there was a tone underneath it, a rhythm I'd learned to recognize, familiarity disguised as professionalism. I waited, because by then I knew. If I stayed quiet, the truth always surfaced. A few minutes later, Ethan typed, "Where's your book? Is it there?" My stomach dropped. I'd read enough messages now to know when words weren't what they seemed. Kara replied, "It's here already." Another pause. Then Ethan, "Maybe you can bring it to my room." I felt cold all over, because there it was, the pattern, the casual invitation, the plausible excuse. If anyone ever saw this thread, it would look harmless. A book, a favor, nothing more. But I'd been living inside this story long enough to know better. Kara responded, "Bad idea? Ethan, only if you're going to sleep and not cause trouble." My hands started shaking so badly I had to set the laptop down. Cause trouble. The words pulsed with meaning. History. Implication. Kara typed, "Maybe I need some gum now." I felt something inside me finally snap. Not loudly, not explosively, but cleanly, like a thread pulled too tight. Because gum doesn't need to be delivered at night. Books don't require hotel rooms. And people who aren't crossing lines don't speak in code. Ethan replied, "Go get your gum." Then, after a beat, "Open the door." I don't remember crying. I remember feeling empty. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't intuition or trauma or insecurity. This was choreography, a dance they both knew by heart. I watched the messages until my vision blurred. I watched until my chest hurt. I watched until the last, stupid part of me that hoped for innocence finally gave up. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I called a lawyer. I didn't cry on the phone. I didn't ramble. I explained the situation like I was reporting someone else's life. The lawyer listened quietly, then told me exactly what I needed to do. Say nothing. Document everything. Go no contact when the time comes. When Ethan texted me goodnight later, all affectionate emojis and casual endearments, I didn't respond. The next morning, I sent him one message. A short email, actually. It said that all future communication would go through my lawyer. That was it. The fallout was immediate. He changed his Instagram password within hours, unlinked his WhatsApp, locked down every digital door I'd ever known existed. He tried calling me. I didn't answer. He tried calling my best friend. Blocked. Then the emails started. Long ones. Panicked ones. Confused ones. He claimed he didn't know what prompted this, that he was blindsided, that he needed to understand what was happening. He told mutual friends he was worried about me, that I was going through something. Then the tone shifted. The emails became emotional, desperate. He said he couldn't live without me, that this separation would kill him, that he needed to come home, tonight. The words felt manipulative even as they scared me. Nothing explicit, nothing reportable, just enough implication to make my heart race and my hands tremble. I don't think I'll survive this. I can't handle another night alone. If you don't let me in, I don't know what I'll do. I called the police for a welfare check. That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Because loving someone doesn't mean letting them hold themselves hostage to your boundaries. When the police confirmed he was safe, the guilt hit me hard, but not hard enough to make me break. That night, Ethan sent another email. This one was different. It was his truth, or what he wanted me to believe was the truth. He admitted to flirting, to deleting messages, to poor boundaries. He insisted nothing physical had happened. No sex, no kissing, just hugging, just emotional closeness, just mistakes. Reading it felt like being gaslit in slow motion, because every paragraph contradicted something else he'd already told me. The timelines didn't match. The details blurred where clarity should have been. He framed everything as stress, pressure, work overload. Never choice, never intent. I noticed how careful his language was, how every admission was wrapped in denial, how he separated cheating from everything he'd actually done, as if betrayal only counts if it ends in sex. I sat with that email for a long time. Then I realized something that made my chest ache with both sadness and clarity. The worst part wasn't what he did with her. It was how easily he lied to me, how naturally the deception flowed, how practiced the justifications were, how quickly he shifted into victim mode the moment he was caught. This wasn't a single bad decision. It was a system, and I finally understood that no amount of truth, even a full one, could fix what had broken. Because trust doesn't die when someone sleeps with someone else. It dies when you realize the person you loved was capable of looking you in the eye, telling you they were going to sleep, and opening the door to someone else instead. By the time Ethan asked to meet me face to face, I already knew how this would end. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood the pattern. The truth never arrived all at once with him. It dripped, carefully, strategically, always just enough to keep me listening, never enough to fully condemn him. He sent another email, then another. Each one began with some variation of, "I need to be honest," and each one somehow managed to be less honest than the last. First, it was only flirting. Then it was emotional closeness. Then it was hugging. Too long, he admitted. Then it was falling asleep in the same room. Then it was waking up confused. Every new version contradicted the one before it, but he told them all with the same calm certainty, like he genuinely believed that if he spoke slowly enough, softly enough, reality would rearrange itself to fit his words. At one point, he admitted that Kara had been in his room more than once. "Nothing happened," he insisted. "We just talked." I reread that line until the letters blurred. Because talking doesn't require deleted messages. Talking doesn't require coded language. Talking doesn't happen at 1:30 in the morning, behind locked doors. He said she'd come over to retrieve a book. I already knew that wasn't true. The book had never left her possession. The timestamps proved it. The earlier messages proved it. The way they spoke to each other, casual, teasing, intimate, proved it. When I confronted him with the inconsistencies, he didn't deny them. He reframed them. He said stress had fractured his memory, that he was dissociating, that he needed compassion, not interrogation. At one point, he even suggested a polygraph test, a medical exam, anything to prove he hadn't slept with her. I realized then that he was still missing the point entirely. This was never about sex. It was about choice. He chose to lie. He chose to delete. He chose to protect her comfort over my sanity. He chose to let me question my own reality rather than face the consequences of his actions. I spoke to Kara's roommate, Sienna, once. Just once. She was defensive from the start, evasive, annoyed that I'd interrupted her vacation. She admitted someone had knocked on the door that night. She admitted a man had come in. She refused to say how long he stayed. Then she told me she wasn't responsible for what happened in the room. That was all I needed to hear. When Ethan and I finally met in person, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no throwing things, no cinematic breakdown. We sat across from each other in a neutral space, his friend nearby, my phone recording quietly in my bag, not out of malice, but out of necessity. I'd learned not to trust memory when manipulation was involved. He cried, he apologized, he said he'd lost himself, he said he'd never meant to hurt me. I listened. And for the first time since all this began, I didn't feel pulled toward him by habit or history or love. I felt tired. Tired of parsing language. Tired of translating excuses. Tired of being the emotional custodian of someone who kept setting fires and asking me to help put them out. When I spoke, my voice was steady. I told him that even if I accepted his version of events, even if I believed that nothing physical had happened, I couldn't rebuild a marriage on omissions, half-truths, and emotional betrayal. I told him that trust isn't a light switch you flip back on with therapy appointments and promises. It's a foundation, and ours had collapsed. He asked me if there was anything he could do to fix it. I told him the truth. No, not because I didn't love him, but because I finally loved myself enough not to stay. The divorce process was quiet, administrative, painful in a dull, echoing way. Papers, emails, logistics. There were days I missed him. Days I replayed the good memories and wondered if I'd overreacted. And then I'd remember the messages, the timing, the lies, the door opening. I learned something through all of this. Something I wish I'd learned sooner. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears a calm face. Sometimes it tells you you're imagining things while deleting the proof. If you're reading this and your gut feels heavy, listen to it. Love shouldn't require surveillance. Trust shouldn't feel like detective work. And no one who truly values you will ever make you feel crazy for asking why they told you they were going to sleep and invited someone else into their room instead. I didn't lose my marriage that night. I lost the illusion I was safe in it. And in the end, that loss gave me something I hadn't had in a long time. Clarity.